Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining me tonight in this unpacking episode where we unpack thoughts, concepts, ideas, concerns, perspectives, and anything that I think we may be interested in. I certainly am interested in the things I'm talking about. I hope you feel in the same way tonight. I have a budding friend of mine, a mentor in a lot of circles, and a helper for a lot of people, a counselor, an advisor, a speaker, a pastor, a leader, all the adjectives and all the positions that you can imagine when it comes to helping people. He probably in some capacity fills. And so I'm excited about it. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to come in and just join us. But my name is Lemuel Ayatude, and this is Unpacking. Come back in 30 seconds as I play my ministry intro. Welcome again. My name is Lemuel Ayatude. I'm your host for the Unpacking, and tonight I have an incredible gentleman by the name of Bradley Vinson. He's going to come in right now. Welcome, my brother. Good to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, happy to be here, man. Happy to be here, hanging out with you, man. Breaking a little virtual bread with you, man.
Yeah, that's right. I'm so glad to have you here. For those people that may not know, probably do not know you in my circles anyway, we met each other through this software that we're using right now called eCam. Incredible software, but better community, I think. More than just the software, the community. And I knew we met through the animation technology side of these things, of like the creative side of these things. But I come to find out that you provide grief counseling and advisement. And that really intrigued me, especially in our time in this season where people are losing family members, people are losing jobs, people are losing finances, and now this coming election. So there's a lot of things that I think people are experiencing when it comes to the grieving process. I don't know. I'm a nurse, so we kind of studied it a little bit, but you're a practitioner in this thing, so I would love for us to unpack it. But before we do that, can you just share a little bit about who you are, what you've been doing, how long you've been doing it for? Bradley, thank you so much again.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me again, man. Yeah, I've been in ministry a long time as far as serving the global community, right? But I was in seminary in 2015 and really studying men's ministry and couples ministry. And then we had a family tragedy that kind of changed my trajectory of how I serve the community. And I started serving the grieving community after that. And I've pretty much been headlong into that service since 2016, late 2016. And I consider myself a grief advocate or advocate for the grieving versus a counselor. I'm not a licensed counselor, but that's the community that I serve in ministry. And, in practical senses also. Yeah, but I've been doing that since 2016 and working with men and couples and still doing men's ministry, I guess, So helping men that are grieving and couples and just the grieving community as a whole. So I've been doing that for a few years now.
Well, in all transparency, I've never actually heard of such a role. Is this something that is more prevalent? I'm just not aware of it, or is this something that very few people do?
Well, I mean, grief advocate is what I kind of call myself. I don't even know if that's an official title, but that came from me, quite honestly, advocating for my grieving grandchildren, right? How you have kind of a child advocate, so to speak, right? Where the child can't speak for themselves, and
Yeah.
that person that goes to court with that child.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing, right? So when my grandsons were going into the school system after the loss of their little sister, well, she was the middle child, had a baby brother. She was in the middle, then an older brother. So, but when they were going back into the school system after that loss, I went in and I had to advocate for them, right? It's like, I have two little grieving boys coming into your school. So their sister's birthday is going to be hard. This might be a hard day for them. They may be grieving and they need to see the counselor on a regular basis. And when they're angry, they might not be anger, it may be grief. And so I was advocating for my grandsons, right? But then I realized that many of us in the grieving community need someone to speak for them sometimes, right? Because sometimes we don't have the words, or we don't know how to, from lack of a better term, defend ourselves. We need an advocate to speak for us and kind of toe that line out ahead of us as we walk down that road. And so that was kind of a title that I gave myself because, like I said, I'm not a licensed counselor, but I'm learning. I have on the job training, with grief. So I'm just kind of helping where I can for others that are on this journey.
So that's fantastic. I mean, grieving, I think, is one of those things where it takes a strong inner I guess inner strength, strong inner strength, if that's so redundant, but just an inner strength. How did you get? I know you're saying that you needed to advocate, but is there a process by which you had undergone in order for you to kind of feel that, hey, I can do this for others. I can support other people, and I can actually help men and possibly other people in this area.
Well, quite honestly, I mean, and dig into the story a little bit deeper, and I've already alluded to it. I lost my 4-year-old granddaughter
Oh my,
in on May 11th, 2016 to a car accident.
oh my
And I'm
goodness.
in seminary, right? So I'm going there to be closer to God and to lead ministry and to lead men to Christ. And I never lost my faith, but I was shaken. I was definitely shaken. And as I looked for tools to help me and my family get on the healing journey, there wasn't many, right? Especially for grieving grandparents. Because usually, if if someone dies, it's usually the grandparent, right? We're usually burying our parents. Very few people have to bury their children. But then, even on top of that, a grandparent burying a grandchild, right? And so
Can't even
I was
imagine,
looking
brother.
for resources and tools to help with that. And there weren't many. And so
Mm,
I started digging in. It's like, okay, so what do I need? What are the questions me and my wife have? Because we know there's other grandparents out there with these same questions. The loss of legacy, the loss
mm,
of, I would tell someone I lost my granddaughter. They would say, oh, we're so sorry to hear that. How is her mother? And not
mm.
that our daughter is not important, our granddaughter's mother is not important, but
Yeah.
it's like I'm talking about us
Me.
grieving, right?
Yeah.
And we also learned that the further you are away from the child in lineage, the less care you get, just naturally, right?
Wow.
So if a child dies, people hone in on the mother. The father doesn't even get as much support as the mother gets, right? But as you get further away from the mother or the parents, the less and less you're thought about. And it's like we need to help those people, the cousins and the aunts and the grandparents, right? And so I started kind of digging into that, and even the dads, right? Because you have that male thing first, right? And but then there's that automatic, you know, the mom must be taking it so hard. So everybody flocks to the mom, and the dad is just kind of left standing there, right? And so even dealing with men's grief and things like that, and I just dove into it. I said, okay, God, as you're helping me, I know, I know you didn't let this happen to my granddaughter for me to have a ministry. I'm never that focused on it's all about me, right?
Yeah.
But everything can be used for God's glory.
Yeah.
So now that I'm here, what can I do to glorify God in this and help other people get through it? Right. And so that's how the ministry started, just from my need and my family's need to figure out how to heal in a practical sense too, right? And so we just started helping other people.
Um, I feel like calling you pastor. Are you a pastoral? Is that a
Uh,
minister
I,
or
yeah, I'm ordained minister. I don't pastor
okay?
a church. Yeah.
Uh, I I for those that are watching and for those that do not know, this program unpacking, this is all unscripted. Um, for the most part, I do not speak to my guests about what we're going to talk about. I don't even write down any questions, just because I want to respond. I want to respond right as raw as possible. And I have to say that I didn't realize that this program would be that personal to you. I thought this was something that you just kind of picked up in some way. Lisa says here that she's sorry for your
Yeah.
loss,
I appreciate that.
um, and I didn't even know that it was going to come in this fashion because, well, I didn't know it was so personal. Your journey into grief counseling, and you talking about it. Actually, we have members. I have partners in the ministry, and that's what we call members. That's what I call my members of a church, partners. So I have partners in the ministry that actually lost their son through violence. He was killed, and it was actually on October 15th, I believe, is the um, memorial, or I don't know what they're calling in the grief community. And this is probably something that you can help me unpack on kind of the verbiage of what you use when it comes to people grieving. But um, I didn't even consider. I considered the mom and the dad. I considered, actually, you're right. I considered the sister and the weight. And a lot of times, I think that the men feel a necessary burden to kind of unweigh or unburden their wives, and not be in that place where they're being consoled themselves. How because of the angle of what you just said, where the mother is actually the one that pretty much is the pivot point for grief. Um, what do people do outside this center point? What happens to them when it comes to their grieving process? Do they feel
Yeah.
neglected? Do they not get a fullness of the grief?
Yeah. A lot of people, quite honestly, once you get outside the mom, they consider themselves the forgotten grievers.
Mm,
Um,
this is
in
so
a
good.
sense, when you start grieving, you automatically feel forgotten anyway, right? Because the world keeps on spinning when your world has fallen apart, right? And there's a sense of nobody knows, nobody cares, But like I said, the further you get in child loss, the further you get away from the mother, everybody feels forgotten. Now, but I'll say this too, right? The relationship between a mother and child starts at conception. Usually, the relationship between a father and child starts at birth. There's just a
Wow.
different connection, right? And just
Wow.
to be bluntly honest with that. Now, yeah, you love your child and you're rubbing your wife's belly and the whole nine,
Yeah,
but you don't have that connection your wife has. You just don't.
it's true.
Your connection starts at birth, right? So there's just a whole different connection.
Mm,
And just a natural thing of, wow, that mother lost a child.
yeah.
Everybody leans into that. Now, well, usually when I'll give like this presentation about men's grief, and I give everybody this scenario, and I would say, who would you help? What would you do?
Who
And
would you help?
this
What would
wraps
you
up
do?
in, yeah, this wraps up in a nice little bow. Who would you help? What would you do? So, all things being equal, if you saw two cars broke down on the side of the road, one with a man, one with a woman, which one would you help first?
The woman.
In a straw poll, everybody says the woman.
Yeah.
Second question: men and women, if you're broke down on the side of the street, what's the first thing you do? A woman to the person would say, I'm gonna get on my phone and call somebody for help. A man to the person always says, I'm gonna get out and inspect it and see what's wrong.
Yeah.
That's how grief is. So when
Mm.
something happens, we naturally go to the woman first, and then men, we're going to try to figure this out on our own, and then we'll see if we need some help. So first of all, society is going to say woman, and then man is going to say, let me see what I can do.
To the
And
woman,
so in
to help the
both
woman.
cases,
Yeah.
we're pushing away help, what little we may get,
Yeah.
but then nobody's trying to help us first, right? And so that's grief in a nutshell between men and women.
Yeah.
But then there's the men can figure it out, right? That's why you go help the woman first. You figure the guy's going to figure it out. And it works the same way with grief. When other people are embarrassed by a man crying, that's not even your husband or your brother, because men shouldn't do that. So
Yeah.
all these things, right? What is manhood, right? Because now we see grief as a feminine topic,
And it's not.
right? Grief is grief,
Yeah.
right? And at some point in our lives, we're going to grieve somebody, or somebody's going to grieve us, point blank.
Well,
Man,
Eva
woman, child.
here, one of Eva Johnson, just put grief can be so heavy to grandparents and siblings, and I know we're
Yeah.
talking about men and how they can be affected, but I never even realized the distance of grief, and the effects of grief to those that are not necessarily center, which is you're saying is really kind of like revolving around the mother, especially if it's talking about a child. But how does that affect grandparents and cousins and all these people related? Do they? I'm just thinking of the times where I've lost a family member and I just kind of felt I got to just tune it off because I don't have a reason to grieve.
Yeah, and here's the deal. Your body and your spirit knows that something is gone.
Mm.
You can't fix enough cars, you can't build enough bird houses, you can't work enough hours at work for grief not to have its time. So we tell people you need to lean into your grief. Yes, everybody has that woe is me, cocooning, you just can't get out of bed. Sure enough. But at some point, somebody got to wash some clothes.
Mm,
Somebody got
yeah.
to go to the grocery store. You have to live your life, right? I'm not saying move on. We're saying move forward. How do I move forward with this grief? How do I carry it, right? And so you can put off grief all you want to. Grief is going to have its time. It might be 15 years from now. A very good mentor in the grieving community told me his brother died when he was a toddler, and his parents acted like his brother never existed.
Wow.
And so he went through life from a toddler's age, realizing somebody's gone, but nobody's talking about this guy. He
Mm.
realized that as a toddler, and
How how did he tell you how he realized that?
because it was his brother. He knew somebody was there one day and then gone.
I see. Okay.
There's no age on realization, right?
Mm.
He said he couldn't grieve until he was in his 30s. And
Wow.
he realized he never grieved his brother because he was born and raised in an age where people don't grieve, right? You got to go back out to the farm and do this work. You got to go to work. So we don't have time to grieve. And so when his brother died, his parents literally acted like he never existed because they had to move on with life, right? It was a tough time. We got to get through this. Not thinking of that little kid that had a brother that now
Yeah.
we're not talking about this person. Where'd they go?
Because grief is personal, right? And
Grief is personal.
you're not really considering those around you that are grieving also.
And even this, because we're grandparents and we lost our granddaughter, and we've had other losses since then. But even my wife and I, we shared a granddaughter, but then we had our individual journeys about her.
Is that healthy, Bradley?
Oh
Is that
yeah,
healthy to have
because there's
individual?
things. Oh yeah, because there's things that I can't grieve that my wife was grieving, right, or is grieving still. She walked up to me one day about 2 months in to our journey, and she said, I'm grieving the loss of motherhood. I'm
Mm.
like, what do you mean? She said, because we have 5 grandchildren and Alana was the only girl. So I was a mother, our daughter's a mother, and Alana was the next chance to be a mother in our family. She said,
Wow.
I've lost that. And as
Wow.
a man, I
That's
never
deep.
would have thought of that. Right.
That's deep,
And
bro.
so we lost a granddaughter, but she lost a whole different legacy.
My God.
Right. And it was healthy because we're able to discuss that, but that's a hurt I can't touch.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but I can walk alongside of her as she heals. And I always call it healing, never healed.
Yeah.
Right. So you're always on the journey of healing. I may
Wow.
never be healed on this side of eternity, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to lean into it and try to get up this mountain. Right. And I'm not going to avoid it. I'm not going to, act like she didn't exist. I'm not going to act like I'm too strong to cry and all those kind of things.
You mentioned avoidance. Can you unpack a little bit some of the healthy measures of grieving versus unhealthy things that people use to grieve, and
Yeah.
what can we do? I know there's threefold question, kind of like the positive, the negative, and what do we do as friends and relatives or people surrounding folks that maybe the grief is not so heavy on us. Maybe we're just
Right.
affected because I feel grief right now as I'm talking to you, because I know every time you do a teaching, every time you do a tutorial or a mentoring, you always say Alana's Papa, and I always envision this little girl, just jumping on your lap and just being so. And now when you mention it, I can't say I'm not emotional right now. I'm trying to hold back a little
Yeah.
bit, understanding now where you're coming from, a little bit of that picture. But can you unpack with us some of the things that people can do positively, some things
Yeah.
that can be done negatively, and how we can come in as their community to help in either or?
Yeah. I mean, let's start with the negative stuff first, and then we'll talk about how to heal some of that negative stuff. So, one of the things is obviously, self-medication, which is, drugs, alcohol, things like that, that people tend to do to numb the pain or relieve the pain. You definitely don't want to do that. Um, but then people get into risky behavior. And I use it as a joke a little bit, but it was like, hey, if you were a homebody or your friend was a homebody, now they're out running with the bulls, and jumping out of airplanes and stuff like that. That's not normal for them,
Yeah,
right? They're trying to find ways to not think about that. So the adrenaline rush has their mind focused on something else, right? So the whole avoidance thing and doing things like that, the self isolation. Now, there is a period of that is warranted, right? And I never want to put timelines on anything because people grieve their way. But there is a time to get out of bed, right? There is
yeah.
a time to get out of the house. There is a time to start moving forward with your life. So too much of that isolation can be that.
Mm,
Um, People that use their grief as a sword against other people.
mm,
Well, I'm hurting, so I get to treat you like trash,
mm.
right? And so, even as grievers,
That's so good.
we are under the obligation to grieve with grace, and that's hard, especially when other family members aren't grieving like you, or friends aren't grieving like you, or I remember when my granddaughter first died, I would be driving to work and I would be mad that other people are on the road with me. How dare you be shopping? My granddaughter's dead.
Mm,
Those are my thoughts. You know, how dare you be on the street corner laughing? My granddaughter's dead. Right. And you go through that, but that's part of the healing process. Um, but those are probably some of the major things, the self isolation, the frustration with people and lashing out, and the self medication, probably some of the biggest things. Now, for men, it's the ideation of death. You know,
okay.
your mortality comes kind of in your face now, right? And it's like death is kind of always at the tip of your finger, right? Now, men would even tend to act out on that more than women do. So they have to watch out for that and kind of watch your friends for that. One thing that I tell men also, after you, and I call it a grief event, and that's not to be callous, but the day my granddaughter died was a shift in my life, right? So that was an event in my life, the day she died. Now I'm living that out now, but that day was that day, right? So once you have gone through a grief event, I tell all men this: within a year of your grief event or the anniversary of your grief event, go have a man checkup. Go get yourself checked, because a
What does
lot
that
of
look like?
physical. Well, I mean, you go have your man checkup. You go
Okay,
get your
all right.
blood drawn,
Like
and
a regular,
you get.
regular.
Oh
You're
yeah,
talking about physical checkup. You're not talking about
yeah. The
euphemistic
whole
checkup.
right now, you go get the whole nine. You go in and you say, "Hey," and you tell your doctor, "I've been grieving for a year, and I haven't been taking care of myself," because
Wow.
you won't. Because even when you're grieving, you have to tell yourself to breathe. Some days you're sitting there and you realize, I'm holding my breath. So physical ailments and other ailments like that can happen because your body, you're not caring for yourself like you should. And you're a full being, right? Physical, mental, spiritual. And when your spirit is hurt and your mental is hurt, it's going to hurt your physical too. So go get checked out. You go check for high blood pressure, get your blood drawn,
Mm.
and go do those things. So that's the kind of stuff it's kind of a mix of bad and good things. I kind of mix them. But then there's an acronym that we used to use. Um, there's an acronym in the counseling world that's called DEAR, DEER, but I changed it to my own thing and I call it deeper, DEEPER.
Hmm.
And things you have to remember to do for yourself. These are just kind of practical things and some other things. It's like, make sure you hydrate. So drink and eat, right? D,
Huh.
drink and eat. E,
I can't. I can't
exercise.
believe. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. I can't believe that. Because when I think of grief, right, I think of it like almost like this ethereal, spiritual
Mhm.
thing, and you're bringing it down to where it's like, bro, you got to go to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of thing, where your sustenance, you've got to remember to drink. I've never even considered that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
And why is it? Can you
But I
unpack
do it
some of the reasons why that is?
because, the and I don't believe in the stages of grief. I don't follow that. I
Okay.
don't I
Can
don't
you
push
unpack a
that.
little bit about what they say is stages of grief? And you just said you
Yeah, I
don't.
mean, because they talk about the I think it's
Because I was thinking
anger,
about right
denial,
now the stages of grief. So I'm glad you brought it up.
right? And because it's like anger, denial. Uh, I don't know what I mean. I can't remember. I know what they are, but I can't think of them right now.
Yeah.
But I don't follow those, right? Because quite bluntly, um, I hate to use a wrong word, but so to speak, marketing has taken that over.
Hmm.
Um, the lady that wrote that book, Kubler Ross, wrote that book for the dying. She didn't write that for the living that has
Who are
experienced
grieving.
somebody else dying.
Makes
That
sense.
was a book of people that were dying that she
Right.
interviewed, the stages they went through
Right.
as they were getting closer to death.
Right.
Somehow, in the whole scheme of things, marketing grabbed a hold of it, and then now it became
It
the
makes
five
sense.
stages of grief. You
Yeah,
know,
it makes sense.
and
Yeah.
and so and she even wrote that in the preface of her book. These are not the stages that people that are experiencing people dying go through. These are the
This
stages that people that are dying go through.
that's when
Because
you're
she
in
interviewed
your own deathbed and
right,
you're angry at God and you're giving God a chance. You're bartering.
right. So
Um,
all those things are part of that. Now, yes, you wish you could bargain and say, "Hey, God, could you have given my granddaughter 5 more years and taken them from me?" So you go through that as grief, but you don't go through those stages, right? It's just because you're kind of and honestly, you're kind of used to that marketing or how that's been pushed. You think you're in those stages,
right.
but they weren't even made for us. They weren't
This is
made
so
for
good.
grievers. They were made for people that were on that journey through terminal illness, heading to that final resting place. And
So break
so,
down that deeper for us.
yeah, so we have the D, so drink, hydrate, eat. E, exercise. You got to get moving. because you're going to get stagnant. You're going to sit around. You're going to just mope around. E, express yourself. This is a huge one. And this is when I created what I call the 100-0 rule for people that are grieving. It's the 100-0 rule. And I tell everybody that's grieving this thing: you are 100% in control of letting someone know you're grieving.
Wow.
You're 100% in control of that.
Wow.
You are 0% in control of how they respond to your grief.
Oh my goodness, man.
So expressing your grief is 100% in your control. Now, remember what I said, though. Don't abuse people with your grief.
Yeah, because sometimes you think you should be grieving more. You know,
Right.
How dare you? How dare you
Right.
take a drink right now? You should be famished. How could you?
Right.
How could you even been thinking about watching a movie? You know.
Right. And so your grief is yours, and you are 100% in control of letting people know you're grieving. How they respond to that is on them. So as a griever, I cannot take on the responsibility of how you feel about my grief. I'm already carrying enough. Why should I carry your insecurities about my grief? Or you seeing me cry makes you feel some kind of way? I can't worry about that. I remember vividly, and not to sidetrack again, but I was at church once we finally went back to church about a month later, because I couldn't. Oh, that's a whole nother tangent, and I got to tell you about it because all this is unscripted and it's just stuff that's coming in my mind. I actually, because you don't know until you know, right?
Yeah.
I actually counsel or advise people to rethink having a funeral at their home church.
Rethink about having a funeral at their own church, meaning they should not consider having the
funeral of a loved one at their church,
because it makes it difficult for them to come back to church.
It's the trauma, man. For months, all I could see is my little granddaughter's casket.
Yeah, in the front, right? Yeah, it makes sense.
But you don't know that until you're there that day. So it's the things you don't think about, right? And there's nothing unspiritual about a funeral home. There's nothing unspiritual about, a church's meeting room or side sanctuary to do that. There's nothing unspiritual about that, because people don't think that until you're at the funeral that day and you see your loved one and you got to come back to that church next Sunday. And so
makes so much
just
sense.
Want to put that out there.
You know what? So, I've never. I think I've only been in one or two where it was actually done at a church, but I mean that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. But I think Lisa Rosa here put the stages for us. So for those that are yelling at us now in their mind, let's put it up there. So, but anyway, go ahead. So so it is true. So go ahead.
So E is express yourself. That's the second E. P, prayer. Talk to God, right? Because that's just the circles that I'm in. Yes, I speak to the secular world too, and I serve everybody in my chaplaincy with the fire and police departments here. But that's just what I use as part of my grief journey, and that's what I help other people lean into. So P, pray, talk to God. E, and this can be a tough one for a lot of people. Expect it to get better. Expect it to get better. And I would tell people this all the time. It's like, where I am in my grief journey, sad is up the mountain from where I am. I'm in deep grief, but I'm looking forward to sad. Then when I get to sad, I'm looking forward to looking back on memories and not crying all the time about them.
Before you continue, can you unpack a little bit the difference between grieving, deep grief versus sadness? Because that's something I've never thought about myself. I'm hearing it here for the very first time. So can you unpack to me what that the gap may be between the valley
some of
of grief?
Kind of semantics. But I'll say this: first year and a half, seeing other little kids didn't bother me. But seeing anything related to a little girl affected me drastically. I'd go to Walmart, and if I saw pink little outfits, I'd break down. I remember the week she passed away, we had to go to Walmart to go get bottles of water or whatever for the funeral. And I'm walking through the store, and something just drew me to the little girl's aisle of the store. I don't know why. And I found myself clenching little girl's clothing, weeping in
Oh,
Walmart, weeping. And one of the workers came to me, and I said, I just lost my granddaughter. And someone was shopping, and they came to that aisle. And I remember this vividly, a worker at Walmart blocking the aisle so I could stand there and grieve for my granddaughter. So that's grief, right? But now, me thinking about that makes me sad, but I don't have the deep throes of grief like I did that day, right? So, my grandsons will say, "Hey, I'm thinking about Alana and I'm sad." I say, "Okay." And so we'll sit and we'll cry together, right? That's sadness. When I think about some things, I was looking at pictures because my grandson actually just got interviewed this weekend for a blog, and they wanted to talk about his book that he wrote about grief. And I was sitting with him, and so we'll talk about Alana, and that brings up things, and we'll laugh about it, but then we might drop some tears, right? But that's sadness to me. That's not grief, deep grief. Now it's semantics. They can both be used one way or another, and grief is like the formal term for sad, and you can use either one. But I think when you're kind of in the deep throes of uncontrollable, and I hate to use the word uncontrollable, but it's like you're sobbing and you can't, and there's more triggers related. I'll say it this way. That's part of what it is. There's more triggers related to grief than to sadness. So a trigger,
mm.
right? Seeing little girls' clothes, or it used to be seeing a jar of pickles because she had just discovered pickles before she passed away and loved pickles. And she would ask everybody, "Do you like pickles?" And she started giggling.
Right,
And
right.
so I used to see a jar of pickles and I couldn't stand it. But now I see a jar of pickles. I'm sad because she's not here, but I smile because I think of her, right?
Yeah.
And so it's those kind of things. So it's like the triggers
Mm,
are less in sadness than grief. I
mm,
don't think sadness has triggers where grief does.
yeah.
Because triggers come out of anywhere. Sadness is kind of I'm thinking about that, and it's a reaction. Versus I just see a bicycle and I lose it.
I, I,
Right?
I, I feel as I'm talking to you, I can only imagine how valuable this kind of information would be to people who have going through grief. I know most people do not study grief until, and they don't even have a chance to study grief unless something terrible happened, and
Yeah.
and so I'm just blessed. I didn't expect it to be in this capacity, Bradley. Honestly, and I'm being blown away by the blessing that this is, because just the knowledge of it. I think people need to realize that there are these kind of like markers, so to speak, that some of these things that they're going through, or some of the things that they're struggling with, is healthy, and it's part of the process.
Part of the process. Yeah. Part of the process. And there's no reason. I mean, and I'll say this. I now have one of my nieces has a new baby. Well, not new baby. She's a toddler now, named Alana. Spelled different,
Mm-hmm.
but it's Alana.
Yeah.
And we were at the family reunion. We were at some event, and somebody was calling for Alana.
Oh my.
And I'm like, and I forgot my
Yeah.
niece has a new
Mm-hmm.
baby. I guess
Mm-hmm.
she was just walking at the time,
Yeah.
named Alana, right?
Yeah.
And so takes you back, so
Right.
you can
Right.
progress, but then something can take you back to like it was that day I got that phone call, you know. But that's part of the process too. And you shouldn't think there's something especially wrong with me because that happened, right? It's part of the if you love much, you're gonna grieve much.
That's right.
And that's just the way it is.
So
So
you have the prayer, and then you have the
yeah,
last E and the R.
yeah. So the E is expected to get better,
Uh huh.
and then the R is you got to rest. And that's what's weird is that you're already sleeping all the time and moping and all that, but you have to take time to replenish yourself. Do something that refills you. And really, what's so funny? Insomnia. Now, I'm not being clinical because, like I said, I'm not a counselor, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't say 100% of the people went through this, but because I went through it, I'm speaking on it. Like I said, I learned from experience. And it's the weirdest thing where you're always tired, but you can't sleep.
Mm.
I had insomnia for years,
Yeah.
not like a week, insomnia for years. And she passed away in 2016, and we're only now 4 years in. But I had insomnia for years, where I'd lay down and my eyes would pop open roughly every 45 minutes to an hour and a half every night, and I could set a clock by what time I'd wake up every night. And that happened. That went on for years. So rest is definitely a key thing to try to go after, because when you're frazzled, when you're not thinking right, grief is even heavier then, because you don't have the mental capacity, because you're not getting rest to handle things that are coming at you.
Wow. How do
Yeah.
you deal with the days, the times that you passed, um, the coming days. I mentioned the brother and the sister who are dear friends of ours also, who support our ministry, who support us, our partners. And every time October comes, I kind of have to lean in a little bit more and listen a little bit as to what's happening. I encourage them to celebrate her son's death, passing, by bringing all the friends and the family together, and kind of celebrating his life. And I think they did that this year. If I don't recall them doing something what they did this year over the course of the other years, but it really, to me, when I was looking at it, it really kind of, I saw their smiles, and they were celebrating the family, um, and it really brought joy to me. But can you unpack to me what it feels like, and what it feels like as the day comes? Is there a dread that, oh my God, it's coming, that time? What does it feel like, and what should we, those of us that are in the community, in the circle of friendship, should do in those times? Because sometimes I just don't know. Sometimes I kind of talk about it before the season, but when the season comes, I just kind of like, hey, how are you? I hope you're well. I'm praying for you, and that's all I feel to do. But can you tell me a little bit, what people who are saddened, maybe that are in the rest area now, rest time now, or
Yeah.
have found release?
Yeah. But before I go into that, I'm going to tell you this real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is just me. I tell folks this all the time. Whenever you want to talk about my sweet Alana, I want to talk about her.
Mm.
Uh, Now, I need you to be okay that if our discussion brings tears, I need you to be okay with that. But whenever you want to talk about her, I want to talk about her. I will never deny the opportunity of her being remembered.
Now,
So,
is this common, Bradley? Is this common that
and
people do
I can
want to
only
talk
speak for
about it?
me, and
Okay.
most people are open to that. Most people don't want their loved one forgotten.
Mm,
And on that, I would err on that side
I
and
see.
let them say, "Hey, we don't. That's too sensitive of a topic for us."
I got you.
Because if anything, as someone that's grieving, you don't want your loved one forgotten. So whenever somebody can mention them, means that someone's life was touched by them enough to have them mention our loved one. That's just how I feel about it. I know a lot of parents do feel that way, because that's the kind of circles that I'm in with grieving parents that have lost children. So I'm just I would say err on the side of that. Speak about their child as much as you can to say, I remember your loved one. Now, on the other side of that, as someone that's grieving, for us, there's more anniversaries than the day that we lost our loved one. There's now the holidays without them. There's the birthday. If they were a high school student, graduations, proms, all that stuff is the life our loved one our loved one cannot experience now. Like our granddaughter Alana, she never experienced a graduation. At her school, they had a pre-K graduation. Now imagine this, for her to have her pre-K certificate posthumously given to her,
Oh my.
right?
Well,
So she never experienced graduation at any level. So now every year
every time there's
there's a
graduation.
graduation
Yeah.
or people showing their little preschoolers graduating, we
Yeah.
think about Alana, right? Every
Right.
Christmas, because we're buying all boys stuff. There's no girl stuff under the tree. We even had to move our Christmas tree from where we usually have it to another room. We just can't, it can't be there where it was when she was here. So there's those kind of things, right? And this may seem like a practical, non-spiritual kind of thing, but I advise churches to have a calendar for everyone that's had a loss. And you
Very
put on,
interesting. I I'm sorry. I was actually thinking about that because I was
yeah,
like, that it was in this time October, wanted to celebrate people's birthdays and things of that nature. But I always remember, this couple because they're precious to us. Um, and I just think I'm wondering if the church should say something to the effect that, hey, this is the month that they lost their son, and let's keep them in prayer. I just
yeah.
feel
And
I guess I should just ask, right?
yeah, I would ask, and sometimes it's not really, and they might not want that kind of attention. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But a card, we know this month can be hard for you, and we're thinking about you. We're praying for you, and they
Yeah.
get that in the mail. And
Mm.
and then that kind of calendar. It's like, okay, what was the birthday of the person that passed away? Because everybody remembers when they died. But what was the birthday of that person?
Yeah.
Okay, they were a high school student, so graduations and prom time might be tough, right? So send them a little note around that time. Send them a
Mm.
little note at Christmas. Send them a little note at, you know, we know, and
That's so
here's
good.
the thing, because everybody in church knows about Job, right? And they know about all the stuff he lost.
Yeah.
But every sermon you hear about Job is about the other end, and he got double for his trouble. No, Job still had 10 empty chairs at his dinner table. Now, Job had more children. He didn't replace any children.
Mm. Mm.
So Job still had 10 empty spaces in his heart. Those children were not replaced, right? So we have to always consider that. And they're always going to have an empty space at their table. And so for us to recognize that and support them through that means a lot, right?
Lisa
And so,
here. Sorry.
mhm,
Lisa here says, Pastor Jones, you remember Pastor Jones is my middle name.
okay.
You remember me and my family met you through grieving the loss of my cousin Brian Rosa over on Sand Lane. Thank you so much for helping us through it. Yes, that was our pleasure, Lisa. And I remember that time. Actually, we were fairly new to the community there, and this young man, 26-year-old, had a seizure in his
Mm,
bathroom. I believe he was in Florida, and just by just the measure of God, we were able to connect. We didn't know them. We were just a tiny little church in Sand Lane, which is a street here in Staten Island, and we heard that there was a vigil for a young man outside, and we raised a good amount of money for that family. And we didn't know them, and they were not members of our church. We just felt compelled to support them because they were in our community. But Yeah, I mean, this is such incredible conversation, Bradley, because I don't think many churches even consider and talk about grief and talk about those that have been grieving, and how to help this grieving community. That would be the proper term, right? The grieving community,
Yeah,
or people that are
yeah,
grieving.
yeah. And it's so unfortunate. And I'll say this because I'm in ministry. Churches as a whole kind of do a poor job on supporting the grieving community. Um, when a person first dies, you got to beat the church folks off with a stick. Everybody at your house, everybody bringing your food, going to the grocery store for you, praying with you and rubbing on you and hugging you and all this stuff. The funeral happens. You go to the grave site, you come back for repast. They clean the church up because usually maybe the funeral's on a Friday or Saturday. They clean the church up. They back to business as usual on Sunday. And in a lot of
I'm
cases,
sorry.
they over spiritualize grief. If you're
Can you
saved,
unpack that a little bit?
yeah,
Because we need to know this. I hope that this will be viewed by pastors, leaders, and church leaders, and what you're about to say may help us in the way we approach the grieving of our community members. Can you just say or unpack what you mean by over spiritualized grief?
yeah. I mean, it's like if you have faith, why are you grieving? Now,
Mm.
I know at some point I will see Alana again in heaven. That is my belief. That does not mean that I can't grieve on this side of eternity. And I even made like a little meme one day and I said, just because I know how the story ends, don't mean I don't get to cry at the sad parts,
Oh my. Oh
right?
God.
Because I know I'm going to heaven, right? I believe Alana's in heaven, but that does not mean I don't get to cry at the sad parts. And so we go to church and we over spiritualize. It's like, well, you saved. Where is your faith and where is your this? And it's like,
Yeah, it's gonna be all right. Everything is gonna be okay. She's in a better place.
Jesus mourned. And when you think about the story of Lazarus, let me tell you about the story of Lazarus at a whole different level. Because
Yeah,
when you start
please.
grieving, you see it different. And you hear the story of Lazarus, and you get that shortest scripture in the Bible, which may or may not be, how they number scriptures, but I'll leave that alone. That's a whole nother topic. But Jesus wept, right?
Yeah.
So Jesus wept. Some people say he wept because of Lazarus' family grieving and he felt their pain and he was grieved because they were grieved. But here's something that's crazy. And I didn't think about it this way until I started grieving. Do you think Jesus might have been crying because he knew he had to bring Lazarus back?
Hmm.
Let's think about this. He knew what Lazarus was. He knew Lazarus was in the bosom of the Father.
Yeah.
And he had to bring him back to this earth, knowing where he was going to bring him back from. And he was weeping, saying, I got to bring him back to this place instead of letting him rest with the Father. And when I think about it that way, if Alana could have it any other way, she wouldn't come back. And I have to think about it that way, but I'm grieving my loss because I want her here, right? And that's human. And even I never had anger with God because God, I mean, I thought other people in the car heard God speaking to me. It was so audible when we were driving back home from caring for Alana in Louisiana. We were coming back home to prepare for the funeral, and God was audibly speaking to me as I was driving. And he said, if I asked you when would be the best time to have Alana with me, what would you say?
Yeah.
And then God said, when she was 50, when she was 100, how about after you died? And I'm sitting there and I can hear it audibly. And I said, yes, God, that would be best. And he said, if I asked you when would be the best time to have Alana back with me, you would say no time would be the best time, wouldn't you? And I'm driving. I said, yes, God. He said, I know you would say that. That's why I didn't ask you. And some people see that as harsh from God, but it soothed me that I'm not in control. He knows what's best, and he's not a puppet string puller, but he's no more a respecter of me than any of his children. And we all got to go that route at some point. And all of our lives are this much of eternity. But some of them feel just so short when it
Yeah.
happens to children or to whatever else. But all of our lives are that short in relation to eternity.
Yeah.
And I felt a peace come over me. And when I say that to some people, they're like, God said that to you? I'm like, God didn't take my granddaughter. The accident took my granddaughter.
Yeah.
But she is with God now.
Anna here, I don't know, she's part of our eCamp community. She says here, you can read, my dad and I had a beautiful relationship connection. I needed to cry with him, and all my family said, "Don't you cry in front of him." Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it goes back to what we were saying with men, being seen as these people that cannot and should not grieve, at
Yeah.
least publicly. You know,
I mean, and like, and now all disclosure, we're now raising Alana's two brothers, now age 11 and 6. They were 6 and 4 when they came to us, right? After losing a 4-year-old sister. And now I have to look at what is manhood? How do men grieve? Because now I'm doing it in front of two little boys
yeah,
that don't have the inhibitions that men have about emotion, right?
yeah,
And and I had to find myself to allow myself to cry in front of them and to show emotion in front of them. And even if they walk up to me and they say, and I'm watching television and I'm not really thinking of, how men can think of nothing, right? So you got
the,
to
the
sit there,
the the
you got
nothing
thinking of
box.
nothing. Just
Yeah.
sit thinking of nothing. And one of my grandsons will walk up and say, Papa, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about Alana?
Oh boy.
And in that moment,
I'm
I knew what they were asking me. They were saying, I'm thinking about my
about
sister,
thinking
and I
about that's
wonder if
right.
you are too.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I'll say, yes, I am thinking about Alana, and I feel sad. How do you feel?
Yeah.
I feel sad, Papa. And they'll
Uh,
sit in my lap and we'll cry together. But that's showing them the full body of being a man. We have all these emotions, right? And my now 6-year-old grandson, he was 5 at the time, must have been last year. Maybe he was 4. And I remember this so vividly because you think you're doing it right. You think you're helping these little boys grieve and show their emotion. And my 5-year-old grandson he walks into the kitchen and he has a ball, right? And they know the rules. No balls in the house, balls are for outside. So he comes downstairs with a ball because I called him downstairs to clean up his mess on the table. And I said, clean your mess up. Oh, and give me that ball because balls are not for the house. No, it's my ball. He's 5, right? No, it's my ball.
yeah.
No, you're going to give me that ball and you're going to go in timeout because I'm not having that right now. So I put him in timeout. I go in my bedroom, set the timer for 4 minutes. 4 minutes later, we come back out. I said, okay, TJ, you ready to be a big boy now? Go ahead and clean your mess. No, I want my ball. So I'm like, you're not getting your ball. So we go back to the circle again, right? He go back in timeout. But this time I leave him in timeout for about 2 minutes. I go back in the bedroom and he's sitting at the dinner table. I mean, audibly moaning. So I come back out and I take him out of the chair and I get on my knees in front of him. So now I'm eyeball to eyeball with a 5-year-old. And I said, dude, what's wrong? And he just starts weeping, uncontrollably weeping. And he says, I want my sister.
Oh.
And I realized at the age of 5,
Yeah.
All he knew how to do was emote his grief through anger because he had no control. And now the thing he was controlling, that little rubber ball, I've taken that from him.
Yeah.
And all he could do is show anger. And I'm thinking I'm doing all the right things to help these boys learn emotions. And the 5-year-old is emoting his, and I'm sitting and I'm hugging him and holding him. And I said, wouldn't you rather Pawpaw give you a hug than put you in timeout? Yes, Pawpaw. I said, you got to tell me when you're hurting. Just say, Pawpaw, I need a hug.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about, and so I'm still learning. I don't know all
Yeah.
this stuff, and now he'll say, Pawpaw, I need a hug. Or he just walk up and give me a hug. Because I
So
know that's just the connection, right? But all of that is boyhood and manhood.
yeah.
It's not pulling little girls' hair and kicking each other and punching. No, it's I need to cry.
I
I need
think
some tender.
Eva said it here. Men have been imagined or imaged to be the Superman of the family. The bullets of life are supposed to bounce off their chest. Um, and Anna said something here in her comment. I regretted listening to them, and the thought process is this: what would you say to those people that did not know the grieving process, or did not know how to effectively grieve? Because I think that's what you're alluding to: effective grieving,
Well, and
what do you
I'll
say to
say,
those people that feel like, you know what, I should have grieved more? Kind of like your mentor, or the person that you
right,
spoke with, that's 30 years old, and he didn't realize at very young age, a toddler, he was not allowed to grieve because the parents didn't know how to
right,
grieve.
right. And I kind of relate this to parenting, right? Our parents in yesteryears only had a certain amount of tools to help them be good parents. We have more tools now, more books, more videos, blah, 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 to help us be better parents, right? Or more resourceful parents. I tell people this: everybody is the expert of their own grief.
Say that again.
Everybody is the expert of their own grief. So I don't want to be like I'm giving you all this sage advice on how you should grieve.
Mm,
You are the expert on your grief. You knew your loved one better than I'll ever know them. You know the relationship. As long as you're grieving in a healthy way, and you know what healthy is. As long as you're grieving in a healthy way, do it that way. You know self-medicating ain't healthy, so you can make all the excuses you want. So as long as you're grieving in a healthy way, do it that way. Now, people that feel like I should have helped a friend more or whatever else, you can only go by what tools you had, right? You have more tools today. So lean in more, call them, be available. But I tell people this, even as a griever, and this is something that I didn't know until I knew it: the responsibility of a griever to grieve with grace. Because in that isolation and whatever else, you think your friends may be leaving you, right? Oh, so and so dumped me and they don't call me no more. I had to realize this for myself. Your friends are grieving the person you were before you started grieving. And they may not know how to react to the new version of you.
mm,
So they're staying in the wings, right? They don't know how to call you and talk to you. They don't know what to
yeah.
say to you. They don't know to mention that child that passed away, or now that you are a widow or widower. They don't know how to respond to you because they're still married, you know? And it's like you have to be willing for your feelings to be hurt. You got to be willing to let that happen. Reach out. Let the person say, I don't want to talk to you. Let the person say, now's not the right time. Just
This
be
is this
accessible.
this is who is this saying?
This is to the
Who's saying?
friends. This is
They're
to
the
the
friends of
friend.
the griever.
Yeah, be willing to walk alongside them however much of the journey they're going to allow you to walk alongside
Now,
of them.
Bradley, how about if somebody you feel like is just perseverating, and just every single day they're just weeping, crying, they're just, and they cannot be consoled, and they they may be doing positive outlets, but you just feel like they're really beating up themselves for maybe feeling like they're the reason why their loved one, died, or they feel
Grief.
like somebody else did it and I'm gonna go after them, like vengeance and recompense or come upon, whatever those words are. What do you
That's the
say? What do you do?
that's the hard part of grief, and I tell people this all the time. In grief, pain is guaranteed. Suffering is optional.
Wow. Say that again,
Pain is
please.
guaranteed. Suffering is optional. Suffering,
Whew.
almost 100% of the time, is self-inflicted.
Wow. But now,
And
what's the difference? What would be the difference if you can
here,
if you
I'll
if you
give you
can
suffering.
unpack
I'll
it?
give
Yeah.
you suffering right now. A 4-year-old child dies. Every adult in that situation feels they could have done something different. That's suffering. Because it's always like, if I would have did this the day before or the month before, this would
Right.
not have happened. That's suffering. Any of us,
Trying to control
with
things that
right,
you could not control. Trying to put yourself in places that you impossible
right,
to do.
exactly. Because what you're really grieving is the sense of a loss of control, which you never had anyway.
Ah,
And you never had it anyway.
wow. My
So
God.
what could I have, if I would have did this, that would not have happened. Well, with the knowledge you have today,
Sure.
maybe not, but you didn't
Right.
have that knowledge that day. And that's the hard thing for us to get, especially, and not to minimize any other kind of death, especially when there's child loss, because adults feel it was my job
There's
to keep the
responsibility.
children safe or whatever else. And as a man, breadwinner, protector,
Yeah,
you
and
have failed at your job.
I sometimes men are blamed for the death, maybe, right?
Exactly.
Of you could
Yeah.
have done some. Why didn't you do something different?
Right. Right. And it's the things that we can't control, and we take on that burden of suffering, which is self-inflicted. Pain is going to happen. And
Wow.
sometimes we conflict pain and suffering. Like I said, that's the difference, right? That loss of control stuff versus I miss my granddaughter, my heart hurts, grief. Me saying, well, if I would have did this a month ago, she'd still be here. That makes suffering, right? So that's the difference. That's the major difference.
Wow. Wow. Man, when I was telling you, I wanted to kind of get to the ideas of potential losses and not necessarily death, but say for instance with the election and people I'm sure are going to take it to a next level should their candidate lose, regardless of who it may be. But I feel like people are going to enter into this place of grief, um, and I'm praying for our country right now. But I feel like I think what we spoke about today, I think maybe we should like set that aside for another time, because otherwise we'll be here for another hour and a half.
Yeah.
But if there's anything else that you would like to share with somebody that maybe is going through grief or has been through grieving, and maybe even in this conversation their eyes are open to some of the things that are healthy and that they've been punishing themselves for, and they're hopefully are releasing themselves and freeing themselves from that. Maybe you could
Yeah.
speak if you want to do just kind of like a closing or
Yeah.
concluding remark.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I want to say, because you made me think about something, which is self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others.
Oh, sorry.
Um, in your grief is that you have to release yourself of the burden of being God, of being the one that's in control. So even, if you were driving the car and there was an accident and someone passed away, right? You might think there's a sense of control and other things or whatever, but at some level, you have to realize that you're not in control and bad things happen. And how in that can you find your way to heal? Everybody deserves to heal. Everybody deserves to heal, regardless of where you are within that grief journey. If you're a friend that may have, strayed away from someone that's grieving, there's a chance to heal and come back. If you're someone that's grieving and you feel guilt in that, seek forgiveness for yourself.
Mm,
What I tell some folks to do is write a letter to that person that's
mm.
gone on to glory, and even write that letter from their point of view, from what you wish they would say to you,
Oh,
and
wow.
release yourself of that. If I could have done better, I would have done better. Tell them that. You know in your heart that I never would have done that to you or let that happen to you. And I'm sorry that it happened. And I love you and I miss you. You cannot equate the pain and guilt of grief with love. You don't have to be heartbroken to show that you loved someone.
Mm,
You can still have joy. You can still move. I don't say move on. I say move forward in life. You can still move forward and be productive and love again and care for other people. That's part of you memorializing the person that you love and honoring the person that you love. Because if you loved much, you're going to grieve much. And if that person loved you, do you think they would want you to live a life of guilt? Just think about that. Would your loved one want you to live a life of guilt about their death? Or would they want you to remember them? Why would if somebody loved you, would they want the remembrance of them to make you feel guilty?
mm.
And so we have to think about those things. And if you're a friend, be accessible. Keep your eye on them. Remember their loved one. Speak about their loved one. To them, that's a way of honoring them. Let them tell you that they don't want to talk about. If something reminds you of that person, hey, I just saw something that reminded me of your son. And if they say, well, I don't want to talk about that, fine. But 9 times out of 10, it's going to bring them a little sense of joy.
Mm.
It may bring tears, but be okay with that. But I think, that's you honoring them and remembering their loved one. And 9 times out of 10, I think that it's going to help that family. So I would just say, do your best to love each other through it. Love yourself through it. If you need forgiveness, seek forgiveness, and just be available to those that are grieving. To walk along, not to heal them. That is not your job to heal them. It is not your job to manage their grief. That's not your burden to carry.
Mm.
But what you can do is walk alongside of them as they grieve and be accessible. Just sit and be accessible. Don't look for any pie in the sky words. No great enlightenment. Just be available and be quiet. I'm telling you, the ministry of being there,
Mm.
just the ministry of being in somebody's, the ministry of presence. That's what it is.
Presence. Hmm.
The ministry of presence means a lot. And just your presence in a room, quietly listening, may be all they need.
Wow.
Maybe all they need. And so I would focus on that, the ministry of presence.
Brother Vincent, Brother Bradley, what a fantastic, for me, turn of events. This conversation has been definitely expected something different, envisioned something different, and you totally brought on something that is that I believe can help a lot of people, and I do appreciate your time here with me. And I thank you so much for just sharing your story, sharing who you are, and sharing your heart, your family's burden, and your grief, your family's grief, and to help those that may be listening to this right now, or maybe those that will be listening to this, on how to navigate their season of grief. I'm not even sure how to close this this interview, this broadcast, or what have you, but I have to just say thank you so much. Lisa says here, thank you so much. You are both brilliant. I definitely learned a lot. God bless you. Thank you, Lisa, for joining us. Thank you, Anna, for joining us. Thank you, Sister Eva, for joining us. And I guess for those of us that are continuing to learn from life and the journey of life, and like my good friend here, Brother Bradley, going through some things that maybe some people will never understand. In fact, Brother Bradley, is there a way to connect with you? How can people connect with you for the grieving process, or the grieving counseling, or advisement?
They can go directly to my website, bradleyvinson.com, and people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I have a friend that's struggling with something." Mm-hmm. I don't mind talking to people. I don't mind getting on that journey with somebody and walking with them. So if you want to reach out to me through my website, I also have some resources on my website. They're free to download there, and hopefully they're helpful. And I just want to just be available to people that may need the help. So my website is probably the best route, and there's an email form there and stuff like that, so they can get in contact with me. But it's just bradleyvinson.com.
That's right.
Yeah, that's it.
Excellent. So, everybody, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again, Bradley, for this time. I so appreciate your time with us, and thank you again for being with me tonight. And share this video, this link with somebody. I will be putting it on ljaministries.com, also LJA Ministries on YouTube, so that you can share it freely with other people. I think this is just an episode that can definitely help other people. I'm hoping that Bradley will come with me, come and be a guest on this show again, or maybe we can talk about the grief process of our country and the way we're going through. Sister Eva said this has been a good interview. Thank you again. And like I said, I don't know how to close it, so I'll just close it. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, everybody on Facebook. Ruth, thank you. She said, Ruth Blair said it was great. Thank you, everybody. Until next time, God bless you. And I'm your servant, the follower of Jesus, and the lover of Jennifer, my wife. I'll talk to you later. That was from you, Bradley. I got that from you, buddy.
That's cool, man.